Now this is called a Wordle. Show of hands, have anybody used a Wordle? It's amazing. If there's one thing to get out of this, write this down. So it's Wordle, just WORDLE.net. And what you do with that is you just cut and paste a block of text into this and hit enter, and it gives you a graphic that looks like this. So what the algorithm does is the more often a word appears in the text, the larger the word is up here. And there's many, many different ways it can display for you, but I really like doing it. So this is one of our whole book. And you can see here the main themes we get into. It's sort of community is big. We have social, people, business in on it. Oops. And one of the main reasons why business and marketing is changing is the amount of information that's available. So if you think about every 60 seconds, there's 4 million web searches. There's 500,000 times people are sharing some content. That could be something in a Facebook chat. That could be a contribution on Amazon or Yelp on it. 10,000 times a product is mentioned. So that's somebody talking about a product or a service they've interacted with. Could be in a magazine. There's 40,000 links shortened. So sites like tinyURL, when you have a massive long website, it gets you a small one. That's mainly used so somebody can easily share that in something like Twitter, which we have 40,000 of those every minute. And if you think about the amount of data that's created per person, it's doubling about every 18 to 24 months. And a lot of that, so that's data that people create on their own, and also data that is collected about them. And you just think, a lot of that is things like digital cameras. How many more pictures do you take now? That it doesn't matter how much it costs to get developed, because almost all of them will never actually see the development process. So if you run through the numbers on this and the amount of information that's available, at that rate, after 5 years, there'll be 10 times as much information. You get after 10 years, there'll be 100 times as much information. 20 years down the line, there'll be 10,000 times as much information available about you. So you get big implications of that when it comes to things like really targeted marketing. You get medical diagnostics, being able to look after people's health a lot better. There's another big part of the downside for that is on the privacy, which we can probably talk about over cocktails. But mostly today we're going to talk about the good parts of these things. So this shows up. A lot of this comes in the data that people collect and gather on their own. So in 2006, the Time Person of the Year was you. Congratulations. Hope they gave you a nice banquet and stuff for that. And what it specifically meant by you is the individual content creator. And so things like Wikipedia, Amazon, the review section, all of these things were becoming much bigger, powerful, and only possible because of the technology that underlies it. Here's in a Japanese proverb for the wisdom of the crowds. None of us is smart as all of us. So when you get the combination of all of these minds working together, you can really develop some cool applications and solve some really interesting problems and develop interesting things. So this is the opening story in the book I worked on, Wikinomics. Anybody familiar with the Goldcorp story? Right, okay, good. Well, hopefully I'm glad everybody isn't on it. It's a really cool story. So Rob McEwen, who this guy's here, is sitting on these actual pile of gold bars. This is not doctored or photoshopped. This is actual pure gold. He ran a gold mine, and his engineer couldn't tell him where on the property there was gold, which is kind of important when you own this. And he just came back from a conference where they're talking about Linux. And Linux is an operating system created by everybody. It's a community creates this. And he was wondering, why can't we use the same sort of technology and the same sort of philosophy to find out where the gold is on my property? What he did is he published all the geological data. And normally in mining, that's something you keep very close to your vest, something you would never share. But he put it out on the web, and he set a contest up and says, who can tell me where there is gold? So he had about almost $600,000 worth of prizes were given him for this. And he got hundreds of entries. And people were using technology to find gold that have never been used before. People from different sciences and different academic areas came in. So one developed a 3D model where it had this virtual helicopter flying through the soil looking for gold. They ended up finding 110 new targets on the site. This is the Red Lake site. And of those, 80% they actually found gold on. So the market cap of the company went from 100 million to 9 billion. And this guy really, really enjoyed that. Right? hence the gold. Wikipedia, okay. Even though everybody can do it, you really need to be tenacious to keep your sites up there, and there is a hierarchy and stuff to deal with. But it's an organism that gets better and better. There's 16 million articles, 272 languages that are involved in this, and it's if there are mistakes on there, they get corrected, right? And in a lot of spaces, I have a client in the pet industry. It's fantastic. The information is up there on pets and breeding and different breeds and nutrition and all sorts. So it's getting much, much better. Now this guy here is named Simon Pulsifer, and he's actually a celebrity on Wikipedia. He's a young guy from Toronto, and he's made more than 100,000 edits. And he was actually featured in the Same Time magazine issue that I had up earlier. And he has a Wikipedia site based on his work on Wikipedia. He had nothing to do with it because that broke the rules. So he's sort of famous for being famous in this area. And I introduced him on his panel discussion as the Paris Hilton of Wikipedia, which the audience enjoyed, but he didn't. And we're going to talk a little bit about what motivates people to do it, because he doesn't get paid for it. But it's a very prestigious position that he has. He's a leader within the space. Galaxy Zoo, this is a really, really interesting story, I thought. So because the Hubble telescope takes lots and lots of pictures of space, and one of the scientists, a British scientist, was trying to figure out, well, we have way more pictures of the universe that we can look at. And there's probably about 14 people that I have here on my staff. I wonder if there's maybe another dozen or so people around the world that would like to be able to help us. And what he wanted to do is categorize galaxies. So galaxies, at the time, there was two main types. There's an elliptical shaped galaxy, and there's a spiral galaxy. Now, we're in the Milky Way, which is spiral. And computers aren't very good at being able to detect those, but people are. They can look at it right away. So he's saying, I wonder if there's another dozen or so scientists that would be interested in helping us. So he was interviewed on the BBC about this. And they found out, they said, well, what if sort of regular people want to do it? So apparently, you can take a 15-minute tutorial online on galaxy morphology, it's called. After you pass that, you'll be able to tell which one of these things are. So you only want two pieces of data. It says, is it elliptical or is it spiral? And if it's spiral, which way does it turn? So he had 275,000 volunteers. And of them, they looked at 75 million galaxies and were able to set this up for it. And if you think about it, he was baffled. He had no idea that a non-scientist would want to participate in this. But you think about it, there's a lot of cool things about this. Because A, you're doing something, you're contributing to the scientific knowledge, rather than watching that particular episode of a sitcom. And also, you're probably the very first human being to look at this object. It wasn't even available to be looked at more than 10 years ago, and there's this massive pile on it. So they really found that an interesting exercise, and it also changed the sort of scientific community, which used to be very, very, keep things very close to your vest, but now it's more open and asking for people for help. Here's another British example. This is what's called a mashup, where you take information and you put it onto a map. So what this one does, it helps with cycling safety in London. So it's just a map of London, and these red dots here show where there's bicycle accidents. So it's just a matter of taking information that's available and putting it up in an illustrated way. And what we can learn from this, it's like if you're a cyclist, you can learn, well, if I'm at this junction here, Oxford Street with Arway Street, I know to be careful because there's been some accidents here. And also from a civic planning point of view, you learn to here's something where we need to make a change, whether it's putting a new stop sign in, changing speed limits, that sort of thing. Any video game players in the room? We won't judge you for it? Okay, good. Would you be able to tell us what a walkthrough is? Are you familiar with that term?
It's like an online guide. Somebody writes for a game that sort of describes how to get started and do the tasks the game wants you to do.
That's exactly right. So if you didn't hear it in the back, it's done by amateurs, and they put together an expanded guide to the game. This particular game here is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Purely through research, I actually finished the storyline of this game. And it took 4 years. So when I tell my 20-something employees that, they're just disgusted. Because it's supposed to take about 40 hours to get through a game like this. And I could have learned a language or, looked at thousands of galaxies and stuff, but I actually went through that. And you're right here. So this is it's competitive. People want to have the very best walkthrough. So Rockstar Games, which makes this game, if you buy this, you get about a 16-page booklet. If you rent this game from Blockbuster, because they've lost the map and the instructions by the time it gets to you, the only instruction is hit triangle to get into a car and wait for further instruction. The walkthrough that I looked at, it's written by a guy named Chase Ansock. He goes by the name Agriskater, and he put together a 100,000-word document that did just what you're talking about. Right? It explains how to get through missions. It talks about hidden treasure. It looks where there's different weapons, special cars, little cheats and tricks and stuff all through the book. So he doesn't work for Rockstar, but he makes their game a lot more valuable. And he does it because it's very cool in that spirit to have the best walkthrough and have it up faster. And also in a lot of these games, they're not entirely linear, but if you come to a point where you can get stuck, and if you can't solve a problem or get through a particular mission, eventually you're going to give up and throw it away and not be very pleased with this game. So these guys really help add to it. There's a lot of examples in journalism as well. You may remember about a year and a half ago, there was a big scandal in Britain about the MPs and their expense policy, their expense reports. One guy was expensing maintenance on the boat of his castle in a summer home. Right? So all of this came out. So the Guardian, which is a British newspaper, used Freedom of Information Act, and they came up with 170,000 documents where all these guys' expense reports. And they used this data store application, which had already been set up, so the regular people, readers, had access into the Guardian. So they said, okay, here's 170,000 reports that we want to look at. There's no way a newsroom can go through that. So they just put that up and had their readers help with them. And they asked the readers, just put it in 3 piles. Say, this is fantastic, it's got to be on the front page tomorrow. Pile 1, pile 2, is there something interesting here you might want to look at? Pile 3, this is boring, it's legitimate, don't worry about it. So they were able to go through that many documents in 80 hours. That never would have been able to happen before. And it's because it's been set up through technology and also because they've built a community before they actually needed it. This, I think, is relevant into your industry, democratization of media. It's easy. Anybody, Neil Pasricha wrote the Book of Awesome, and his website gets 40,000 hits a day. And it's only because it's really good, right? It's pure meritocracy for these things to go. There's a lot of advantages that come in with people being able to publish. One is we hear from voices we never would have before. They're not right. They're not bound by anything about ad policy. They don't need to worry about sponsors or anything on that. And you really, get to hear points of view you never could before. Now, there's downsides to it as well. Usually, the blogosphere as a whole eventually gets everything right. Just like Wikipedia eventually is very, very accurate. But individual things, people make a lot of mistakes. And there isn't the good parts of the journalist practice and the training and make sure the editing goes through and the fact-checking and that. There's also, if we remember these guys here in Watergate, if everything in journalism moves towards amateurs, who's going to be sponsoring these really, really important investigative journalism? And also, you can look at things if somebody's really rich and wants to sponsor, 100 bloggers to be writing in this fake grassroots campaign, which is actually called astroturfing, so the fake grassroots on that. They can really go and influence things, and people may not want to be a part of it. So another big part here, another piece of collateral damage, if you're looking at the journalism field moving into these amateurs, is that people aren't getting paid. And that happens through a lot of things, these new bases. So one thing is about designers, for example, are now asked to go into a contest and say, I want somebody to do graphic design for my company. You all enter a contest, do some work, and I'll pay one of you. Right? So this is a little cheeky post that was put up on Craigslist. It says, I'm a graphic artist and in need of a job. I've decided to fill this need in the same way many people think they can fill their graphic design needs, with a contest. Right? So send me 1 week's pay and benefits, and I will go through these packages and select one of them. I'll keep all the checks, and one of them will get 2 days of work. Good luck. I'm really looking forward to receive your payment packages. So, it's cheeky, but it makes a point for it. So I'm not suggesting we use these technology and use community to, try to take people's living away from it. But there are good ways and there's ethical ways of doing it.